Hi, this is David Dickens, and today there are so many things going on in our world that we can worry about and we have no control over. But today on the podcast, we want to talk about 4 things that you can control in retirement. I'll go get Walter and we'll get started.
Back for another Cover Your Assets KC podcast. Walter Stroholt here alongside David Dickens, President, Wealth Advisor of Creative One Advisors Group, based in Overland Park, serving you throughout Kansas City and beyond. Find us online at creativeoneadvisorsgroup.com. And I like talking about topics like today's, David, things we can control. I'm a guy that likes to control things. I'm going to self-admit here. I like to be in control, so I like this topic.
Boy, I dig on control. And sometimes it's the illusion of control, but,
Hey, however it comes, we'll take it, right?
Right. And I think deep down, most people I know, even though they certainly wouldn't call themselves control freaks, everybody kind of likes to know that they are in some sort of control certainly of their life and their future. So I think hopefully today is really interesting for our listeners, and so, we'll give it a try and see what happens.
Well, we've got 4 sort of juxtapositioned situations to present our listeners today, so we'll walk through each of these, and then we usually do a little chit-chat here at the beginning of the episode, but this week, folks, we'll move it to the end, so stay tuned to the end, and we'll chit-chat a little bit. But let's jump right in, David, since we've kind of got all this momentum already. Here's our first example. You can't control what happens in the market, but you can control how much market risk you expose yourself to. So break that one down for us.
Yeah, so this one, in my job, you get a front row seat to how people react to market turmoil, and we've had a bunch of that over the last 2 or 3 months. I think the key here is really for you as the investor or as the client, it's really trying to know yourself, and especially how you react when markets fall. Because study after study says that everybody, either loves or pretty much likes when markets are going up. But you have to know whether you hate it when markets go down. And if you hate it, that really has more to say about your risk tolerance than how much you like it when it's going up. Because everybody's, digging on it when it's going up. I got a client that is the perfect example of this. But in generic terms, when markets fall, you might recognize one of 2 people here. If you're checking the markets and your portfolio all the time when markets are going down, you might do that for 2 different reasons. One is looking for a buying opportunity. One might be looking for the point at which the pain is so strong that you have to sell. If you're that latter person, then you really have to be careful of how much risk you take in your portfolio. You need to understand how much risk you're taking and probably take opportunities to moderate or reduce that risk. And then the third example would be somebody who says, markets are going down, I'm not even going to open my statements. This will pass. So that person and the first person who was looking all the time for opportunities to invest, those are people that tend to have a higher risk tolerance. They can accept more risk. They get more return when things are going up. And they're not nearly as likely to do something silly, in other words, sell emotionally at or near the bottom. I have this one client particularly stands out for me, and it's a him, and he's well retired. He doesn't really have to worry about his money. But when markets are going up, I'll get a call from this fella, and he's a little worried about maybe missing out on some stuff and wants to talk about how he might be able to tweak his portfolio. But the minute volatility spikes and markets going down, he's the first guy to call or email and say, hey, we need to get together because it may be time to pull some money out. And so what I know after working with this gentleman for more than 10 years is he talks like he has a fairly high risk tolerance, but I know that he doesn't. There's nobody in the world that has a crystal ball clear enough for this particular gentleman, such that you can be in big when the market's going up, and then you pull it right out just as things start to tip over. That crystal ball, anybody that's been around the block a time or two knows that crystal ball does not exist. It doesn't exist in New York City or Chicago or San Francisco or London or Sydney. It doesn't exist. And so if you think you can find an advisor that does have that crystal ball, then I say happy hunting, but he or she does not exist. So the important thing for me as the advisor is to try to clearly understand who each client is and what their risk tolerance is, and the questions that I can ask to try to maybe more deeply delve in than just a surface conversation of how do you feel when markets fall. So that's one. Market risk that you expose yourself to is really, really controllable, but it's not going to control itself. And so you have to do some work if you're a do-it-yourselfer. Hopefully, if you're working with an advisor, they've done a really good job of trying to uncover who you are when markets are going down.
It's a really good breakdown of that one. It's amazing that sometimes how we act in real life can be so different than our expectation of our behavior, like that client. But that's, boy, the power and the value of an advisor, somebody who can be that outside person to say, hold on a second, you're not exactly aligned here the way that you think. It may be tough news to deliver, but boy, I'd be glad somebody's looking over my shoulder in that respect. So.
Yeah. Stop kidding yourself. Let's get realistic.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not to put that person down by any means. We all have different emotional reactions to the way these things happen. So just being aware of it is the half the battle, maybe more than half the battle. So
yeah, cool. A high risk tolerance isn't necessarily good. Sometimes that makes you take on risk that you don't even need to take on.
Could work the other way, yeah.
Yeah, so there's no reason to glorify one or the other. It's really understanding, and most people, sometimes it shrinks over time. But it really doesn't grow over time. You kind of have a risk tolerance when you're born. Anybody that's been a parent of a kid understands that a lot of it, what we do emotionally is pre-programmed before we even pop out of the womb. So you can shave it around the edges, but you pretty much have the risk tolerance you were born with, and then it's a matter of understanding and how that relates to your money.
Great breakdown of something we can and can't control in regard to markets and risk. Let's move to another area, the second thing you can control in retirement. The juxtaposition here is that you can't control how long you're going to live, for the most part, but you can control how much emphasis you put on creating lifetime income streams.
I thought of this in two different ways. One is the client who is fearful, truly fearful of running out of money, and that puts a whole different spin on creating lifetime income streams that you can't outlive. And that tends to start with the word annuity. If you're lucky enough to have a pension, well, it starts with the word pension. And then your Social Security streams, regardless of what you read in the news, our politicians are very unlikely to mess with your Social Security income stream. But then if you're Social Security, you don't have a pension, you have more expenses than you do Social Security income, which is super common. Well, if you're really concerned about running out of money, then a lot of times an annuity-based product is very helpful. You get a guaranteed lifetime withdrawal benefit. One difficulty there is usually they're not indexed to inflation. And if we have significant inflation over a significant number of years, well, that can be a detriment. But it is a guarantee by that insurance company that they will continue to pay you usually a monthly income stream for as long as you, and sometimes you and your spouse, are around. So that's one type of person where creating a lifetime income stream can be really important. The other is most of my clients they shouldn't be worried about running out of money because they've spent a lifetime being relatively frugal and they've made a bunch of money and they've been good savers. But what they don't sometimes do is establish a retirement lifestyle and then fund it on a monthly basis. So they're creating an income stream for retirement that is akin to what they've been getting for the last 40 years, which is a paycheck every 2 weeks or, twice a month. So most of my clients, this question is answered by putting emphasis on creating an income stream where we fund their checking account from one or two or three different pockets of the retirement assets they have. Sometimes they're tax-deferred pockets. Sometimes they're tax-free pockets. Think your Roth. And other times it's a brokerage account where, depending on what you sell and when you sell it, you can get long-term capital gain treatment, which is tax efficient. But it's really about making sure, if you don't do that, I have too many clients who aren't spending enough in retirement when they're young, and my experience tells me they're not going to spend it when they're older, unless they happen to run into a healthcare problem, and nobody wants to spend it that way. So creating a lifetime income stream is important for both types of clients, those who have done really well for themselves and they're not worried about running out of money, but also those who are worried about running out of money. Different questions that have to be answered. But they can both, by answering those questions, it can make for a happier and more confident retirement for both of those types of people.
Well, that's a really good, I think, summation of this issue that a lot of people face, because we know that fear is there and it's present, running out of money before we pass away, and it would be a lot easier to figure that equation out if we knew all the variables. But that's not how life works, and so we plan differently, and good breakdown of that. 4 things we can control in retirement. Number 3, you can't control what tax rates will look like in the future, but you can control how much of your wealth you leave in places that will be taxed in the future.
Yeah, so it's shocking to me that taxes haven't gone up yet. And I believe that eventually they will. But I was listening to a podcast earlier this week when I was in my car, and this 70-something super wealthy advisor was talking about the fact that he can't believe that this Congress is putting forth a bill that is going to decrease taxes and increase spending, considering where we are as a country. But anyway, that's a rabbit trail we're not going to go down. I did think of this question, how much of your wealth to leave in places that will be taxed in the future. I thought of it from 2 different standpoints. One where somebody might be earlier in their career, and then someone who is figuring out, well, where do I leave inheritance money that's tax efficient? So the first one, and then a particularly interesting example that I have found, I have a couple of clients who saved basically all of their money over their lifetimes in 401ks. And every penny they want to take out, they pay 22 or 24 or more percent to the federal government and another 5% to Topeka or Jeff City. So there's really good reasons earlier in your career to maybe concentrate your retirement savings on Roth IRAs now, your Roth 401k at work, since later in your career, hopefully your earnings are higher or significantly higher than they are now, and your tax bracket will be higher then. And then your 401k deduction will be much more valuable to you later in your career than earlier in your career when your income is lower. And frankly, if tax rates do go up in the future, well, that's an even better time to do the tax deferred 401k. So that's people in the early career. Don't just put that paycheck deduction straight into a 401k without considering whether you have access to a Roth 401k option. And then for the person that's retired, they've got more money than they're going to spend, and they're looking for tax smart places to leave their wealth behind for the next generation. So this probably should be an entire podcast, but kind of at a high level. IRAs are good. Roths are really good. Brokerage accounts and real estate can be great. And what I mean by that is with your IRA, somebody inherits your IRA, not your spouse. They're going to have to take that money out over 10 years. And if it's your kid, and let's say you die when you're 80 and your kid is 55, they could be in their highest earning years and they have to clean that thing out within 10 years of your death. And it's going to be 100% taxable to them in their biggest earning years. So, any inheritance is good. IRAs are pretty good, but they're going to be totally taxable to your heir. So, depending on when you leave the earth and who that heir is, an IRA might not be the best choice. Roth IRAs are really good because the inheritor takes the money out tax-free. But they have to clean it out in 10 years if they're not your spouse. There's some wonky rules, so this is not specific advice to anybody listening to this because the rules have become more complicated. There are certain beneficiaries who get more than 10 years, but most beneficiaries who aren't your spouse have to take the money out in 10 years. If they inherit your brokerage account, however, or a piece of real estate, the IRS doesn't tell them how fast they have to take that money out. That money can just sit there. And let's say that you have a nice, big, juicy brokerage account, and the stocks that are in it, you paid $250,000 for. And that was a while ago, and now they're worth $1 million. Well, if you when you die and you leave that to an heir, the $250,000 that you paid for it doesn't make any difference to the IRS. What matters is the value on your date of death. That's the tax basis that your heirs will have to start paying on. So if they take the money out immediately, well, there's no tax on that because they get a stepped up cost basis on that inheritance. If they take it out 2 or 3 years from now, they'll get long-term capital gain treatment on the amount that it has grown since your date of death. So that's why I say brokerage accounts, real estate, those can be maybe the greatest form of inherited wealth that you can leave behind. Again, because the IRS doesn't tell you how fast you have to take the money out. And you get a stepped up cost basis on how that money would be taxed going forward. Again, Walter, we probably, maybe we should do an entire podcast on that. But that's hopefully a kind of a high level look at places where you might look at leaving your money and your wealth that can be tax efficient in the future.
I think it's how we come up with some of our best topics where halfway through an episode, you're like, you know what, maybe we should do a whole one on this. And then it gets filed away for a few weeks from now. So that sounds like a good plan.
So stay tuned for that one.
Love it. All right, well, let's get to our final thing we can control in retirement, the juxtaposition. You can't control what will happen with Social Security in the future, but you can control how heavily your plan relies on Social Security.
Yeah, so this is one for our listeners that are in their 30s and 40s and early 50s, because you have time to structure your retirement portfolios such that your income plan it's not heavily reliant upon Social Security. So I'm convinced, I think I said it earlier in this podcast, I'm convinced that Social Security will still be there because our politicians, they'll find a way to pay for this. And it's going to be with increased government debt. They're going to borrow to pay. Social Security has always been a pay-as-you-go system. It's always been reliant upon current workers to pay the benefits of retired workers. The problem is that used to be 25 workers for every retiree. Now it's 2 workers for every retiree, and it's shrinking. So Social Security is still going to be there. But if your plan relies on Social Security, that certainly increases your stress and it decreases your options in retirement. So I have a client who is over 60. She tends to run up some credit card bills, and she's trying to wind down her work life. The problem is, because she has credit card bills, that's just evidence that she's living above her means. She's not saving enough outside of what little she has already put away for retirement. So she's going to be much more reliant on Social Security in the future. I don't think that Congress is going to vote to reduce her Social Security. They could, but what you really don't want to be dependent upon, Social Security is not meant to be a full replacement of what you're going to need to have to spend in retirement. It's meant to be a supplement. And right now, this woman is putting herself in a kind of a tough spot, and she plans to work and work and work, and probably not because she wants to, but because she's going to have to. So that's one example. I've got another client who is kind of emblematic of a number of my clients, but this guy stands out. He's a person who worked in an hourly job forever, and he retired when he was 70 because he didn't really have other outside interests. But he saved and saved and saved. He and his wife lived in the same house for 40 years, happily. They lived below their means, and this guy has a stack of money that is really impressive. He's certainly not going to turn his Social Security check away, but he is in no way reliant on that Social Security check for coming in. He had a pension, which he rolled over into a 401k because he didn't want to, he rolled it over into an IRA and rolled his 401k out into an IRA. And now, other than his required distribution, which is more than what he needs to live on, he is in charge of his income world in retirement. And if Social Security blows up, it is not going to affect him 1 minute. So those are 2 clients. I have a bunch. Those are kind of on opposite ends of my spectrum of people I work with. And there's tons more in the middle, obviously. But thinking ahead and working in your 30s and 40s and early 50s with a plan that says, I don't want to be reliant on Social Security. I hope it's still there. But how do I make sure that with what I save today I'll be in control when I get to be retirement age, and maybe I can become work optional in my early 60s, because I do have a bunch of clients whose work ended involuntarily in their 60s for whatever reason. Company had problems, whatever. But your 30s and 40s and early 50s are your real time to make sure that you have a plan that's going to take you through your golden years or your retired years, and not have a significant reliant relationship with your Social Security check.
Yeah, I think that's a really wise thing to point out, David. And you can see there was a pattern with all of these things. There's these larger economic forces or things that happen in our lives that we can't control, but with proper planning, we can put at least some guardrails in place, some bumpers, if you're wanting a bowling alley, kind of analogy here, where we can at least have some expectations, right? So if the worst happens, this is what we can expect to happen to the plan. And if the best happens, this is kind of our upper limit. Are we comfortable with this zone that we're landing in? And if it's yes, I guess the plan proceeds, David. And if it's no, then further tweaking, right?
Yeah, exactly. In a lot of these podcasts, somehow it weaves itself in because it's something I really believe, which is you really need to have a plan. And the earlier you start, the better. But the final story that I'm going to leave you with is a couple that I just met with last week. I've been working with them for 10 years. They are a great couple. They're saying that they're 2 years from retirement. We've loosely put together a plan over that 10 years. And so now what they want is a tightened down plan so that they know 2 years out from retirement, they're good. Well, I can tell by looking at their situation, they're good. But having that plan in a piece of software where they can get in and play around with it is going to be so helpful for them. It's going to give them the confidence that they're looking for to cut the cord on their work. They've been really good, consistent savers. They've been very smart spenders. And we're just now doing a detailed plan. A listener might be saying, well, why didn't you do a plan for them 10 years ago? Or why didn't they have one in their 40s? Because it wasn't where they were right now. I can't force anybody to sit down and make a detailed plan. I just wouldn't do that. I can encourage people to do that. But what we did encourage these folks 10 years ago was remain diligent on what you're putting away. Remain diligent on what you're spending. And when you're ready to do a plan, we're ready for you. And so we've been laying the groundwork for the last 10 years. And now they're in the last 2 years of work, and they want a detailed plan to gain a high level of confidence in their retirement. There are a lot of ways to get to your goals. I think the keys are making sure that you set goals, preferably early, make sure you live below your means, and when it's right, get a little bit of good advice to make sure that you enter retirement and proceed through retirement on a plan that's sustainable for you.
Well, thank you so much, David, for the breakdown today. And if you would like to set up that sustainable retirement plan, you can walk through what David calls the CPR process, taking you through a complete planning review, where you stand right now, where you're headed currently into and through retirement, and how the changes that could be made to your plan will impact what you're able to do in retirement, the goals that you're able to accomplish. So go through that planning process and see what it looks like to have proper planning in place. You can schedule that time to visit very easily. There's the phone method. You can call 913-317-1414 if you have not before. That's 913-317-1414, or go online to creativeoneadvisorsgroup.com, creativeoneadvisorsgroup.com. And on the website, you can find lots of great information, additional resources, and get in touch that way as well. We've got that contact information linked in the description of today's show, so you can find it easily. Well, David, thank you for all the help this week. We're off next week for July 4th. Any fun plans for you?
Well, I'm sure there will be a grill involved.
It's got to be a grill, right?
But other than that, I don't exactly know. What about you? You got a camping trip or something?
We are going to Florida, so we're going to get in a little vacation. It's been a while since we've done a kind of a traditional sort of fun beach vacation for a week.
Nice.
Where we sit on the beach and try to do nothing all week. So we're going to take the opportunity to do that, and Florida should be a pretty good place to be from a fireworks standpoint, I would imagine.
I was wondering, are you a fireworks guy?
I like watching others shoot off fireworks. Yeah.
Yeah.
My middle name is Accident Waiting to Happen, and we have a little family history with firecrackers exploding in people's hands. No one's lost fingers from it, but we've had a few. Gramps has told a few scary stories over the years. Let's put it that way. So.
Yeah, it does make you think.
And I don't fall far from the. I'm the apple that didn't fall far from his tree. So I'm basically a young version of my Gramps. So I don't want history to repeat itself. So I like watching the other people do the fireworks.
Yep, you and I are in the same camp, so it'll be fun, and I'm sure we'll find some good stuff to watch.
I love watching them on the beach, though, because you have any nearby towns, you're going to see their big stuff. And then, of course, you have individuals all up and down the beach shooting them off. So the beach is just a really fun place because the show lasts for a long time because people will start them early and then they'll keep going past the main show and they're all doing their own things. So they're all shapes and sizes, and it's just the beach is a really fun place to see fireworks if you've never done it before.
Wow, never done that. Sounds fun.
It's a neat experience wherever you are I mean, I'm pretty sure any beach you go to, you're going to be able to kind of tap into that experience a little bit. So. Anyway.
All right. I guess I need to add that to my list.
There you go. Well, happy 4th to everybody. Have a great week, and we'll see you in 2 right back here for another edition of Cover Your Assets, KC.
Creative One Advisors Group has been proudly serving families in the Kansas City metropolitan area since 2003. Over the years, we've evolved to help meet the needs of our clients, becoming KC Financial Advisors in 2010. In November 2021, our advisory business was acquired by Creative One Wealth LLC, C1W, and in January 2025, we officially adopted the name Creative One Advisors Group. Previous episodes were recorded under the branding of KC Financial Advisors, which has since been rebranded as Creative One Advisors Group. Any references to KC Financial Advisors should now be understood as referring to Creative One Advisors Group. Investment advisory services are offered through Creative One Wealth LLC, a registered investment advisor. Creative One Advisors Group is a DBA of Creative One Wealth. Insurance services are offered through licensed insurance professionals. Investment advisory services are provided in accordance with the fiduciary duty of care and loyalty that includes putting your interest first and disclosing conflicts. Insurance services have a best interest standard, which requires recommendations to be in your best interest. Creative One Wealth is not affiliated with or endorsed by any government agency and does not provide tax, legal, or estate planning advice or services. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. No investment strategy can guarantee a profit or protect against loss. Neither asset allocation nor diversification can ensure a profit or guarantee against losses. None of the information contained herein shall constitute an offer to sell or solicit any offer to buy a security or any insurance product. Insurance product guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims paying ability of the issuing company. The Creative One family of companies includes Creative One Wealth LLC, a registered investment advisor, Creative One Securities LLC, member FINRA SIPC, and a registered investment advisor, and Creative One Marketing LLC. These companies share common ownership. Additional details regarding advisory services are available in our firm's ADV Part 2A and Form CRS.